Yeah.
Yeah.
So before you got on, I read your work titled The Way of the Feminine to Save the World. And I came across it sometime last year. And I remember how strong the feelings came up for me. It was similar to, well, I hadn't felt like a whirl of emotions like that since I had read The Invitation by Mariah Mountain Dreamer. So I wanted to just hear what it was that brought you to write that, as well as Wild Mercy.
I have no idea which piece you're talking about. I just have like a lot of stuff out there.
It's so good. So I actually heard an audio clip of you speaking it as well, but it's basically, the one who knows to wake us up out of the shadow of privilege, wake us the fuck up. It will be chaotic, all this community building, but your cooperation.
Oh, that is
Well,
from Wild Mercy. Yeah. Sometimes people excerpt things and I don't even know it. So, oh, okay. Yeah. So if it's the piece that I'm thinking of, I'm pretty sure it is. It's from the chapter on what in Wild Mercy, my last book about building community and how the feminine and so maybe we should define the terms feminine and masculine a little bit as we launch into this, because by feminine I don't always mean female. I mean, it's predominantly women and girls, but it's also, people of all genders who identify with that kind of relational, connected, inclusive space of the sacred feminine, as opposed to the like solitary white dude who comes to save the world and tell us all what to do and boss us around, right? It's much more collaborative. And so in writing that piece, I felt really unleashed. I'm glad you picked that one because it's and we can read it together if you want. We have an hour and it's a short piece, but it's about the way in which women and the feminine respond to the cries of the world in a way that welcomes everyone to the table and recognizes that each of us have something vital to bring to the task of stepping up to mend the broken world, right? And recognizing everybody's gifts, even if they don't recognize them themselves, like those of you who are listening who might sometimes struggle with not enoughness or too muchness, and sometimes both at the same time. In other words, that you're not, worthy of contributing to the healing of the world or the co-creating of a new world. And Jewish wisdom, which is my ancestral tradition, only one of my spiritual paths though, says that we're all perfectly equipped to bring our piece of tikkun olam, mending the torn world.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And so much of your work obviously is around feminine mysticism. So maybe you can tell us and our audience what exactly feminine mysticism is and a bit about your approach to feminine mysticism. Like you're saying here about community, I've heard you talk about that a feminine mystic is only as powerful as her community is.
Right.
So that's a good entry point.
Yeah. So when we speak about a mystic, I don't just again, let's define some key terms so that we can go forward with some kind of agreement. A lot of times people think of mystic as having to do with astral travel and, healing with gongs, and all those things are beautiful, but that's not like classically what we mean when we talk about what a mystic is. We're talking about someone who has a direct encounter with the sacred. Some people call it God, some people don't like the G word, but it's that experience of direct divine plugging in, where you experience that presence, that mystery invading your entire being and changing you. And it can happen in deep meditation, doing spiritual practices, chanting, kirtan. It can happen watching the sun go down and having that moment of just unnameable something that dissolves your sense of separation from the natural world. It can happen making love. It can happen making a salad. It can, it doesn't really have any, it's beyond mediation. There are no intermediaries. It's direct. And so to me, that is the feminine. Like the feminine is all about direct connection to Mother Earth, connection to our fellow creatures in creation, connection to the sacred that is both deeply intimate and also beyond all form. And it's like the feminine is both immanent and transcendent, if that's not too technical. So the mystics of all spiritual traditions have always been my friends, and they are often the poet saints of their different respective spiritual traditions, whether the Christian mystics like Teresa of Avila, whose works I've had the great privilege of translating over the last couple of decades, or Rabi of Basra, who was a Sufi mystic, or Mirabai, my namesake, who was a bhakti poet, a devotional poet from India, Hindu, in love with Krishna, the god of love. The mystics of all traditions speak this language of the heart. And it's the women mystics who have been most ignored, surprise, across the spiritual traditions. And they're the ones who I'm most interested in kind of finding and excavating them from being buried and lifting them up and reintroducing them to the world, a kind of a post-religious world like you all, in your podcast. You're not identified with any particular religious institution, and your listeners are like that too. I think that, like so many of us, just the established organized religions don't speak our soul language, and so we're speaking this deeper language, and we're curious about the wisdom across the spiritual traditions and beyond.
Yeah. What comes up for me when you're talking about that is the smallness, or almost a sense of insignificance we get when we start exploring that existential questioning. And when we, for me, I can even call on moments like if it's looking at a sunset or going on a hike and getting to the top and seeing the view, or, being at a campfire and looking up at the stars. And it's pretty much impossible if you sit there for just a few minutes in any of those circumstances to not have that feeling of, wow, like I am this little dot in the midst of this amazing thing happening all around. And I'm just trying to funnel it down into something that I can hold as a human, but the reality is I'm just part of this thing that's so infinite and so big that it's just hard to even fathom. It's scary even sometimes. And that's so beautiful that you've really dedicated a lot of your life and work to giving people ways to touch that in a human body, where it can be very scary, but touch it in a way that we can still get the beauty from it and have an exchange with it. And I know you help people uncover the divine feminine for themselves and within themselves. And so I wonder if there's a way we can, or maybe you can give us some tips on how to begin receiving and calling on the wisdom and the comfort from these female mystics and that divine feminine.
Yeah, there's so many beautiful kind of spiritual technologies that have been handed to us across the spiritual traditions. And so here are some of my favorites in this moment. One is I love creating altars to the sacred feminine. And I have them all over my house, indoors and outdoors. And I have one particular major, I call it puja table, from one of my beloved traditions of Hinduism, where I sit in meditation, and next to which I do yoga asanas. So that's sort of my sacred temple space where my primary altar is. But I have other altars that are dedicated to her, and it reminds me of her anytime I pass them or offer incense or candlelight to them. And they're, excuse me, Ruby, stop. You've got dogs, they're girl dogs all around me. So my altars to the sacred feminine will have statues like Kuan Yin, the Chinese Buddhist bodhisattva of compassion, and of course Mother Mary in various forms, particularly Our Lady of Guadalupe, Nuestra Señora de Guadalupe, and Tara, the Tibetan Buddhist goddess. And Kuan Yin and Mary and Tara are all very kind of interchangeable, right? They're all these bodhisattvas of great compassion, goddesses of unbounded mercy. But then I have Kali, who's fierce and ferocious in the Hindu tradition, whose entire purpose is to vanquish illusion and to set all of her children free. And she's depicted in a fearsome guise, bloody severed heads in a necklace, and crazy matted hair and deep blue skin, and she is frightening, but she is doing what is most important, which is doing anything she can to release any impediments to our full awakening. I have photographs of saints behind me you can see, but probably not next to that well, and most of you are listening, but I have Anandamayi Ma, who's one of the great Indian saints who I love so much, who my lifelong teacher Ram Dass introduced me to. Did you just hold up Anandamayi Ma? No.
Oh, it's just a coffee mug.
Oh, it's a coffee mug. And then I have, that's good too. That's holy too.
Yeah.
And then I have Sri Siddhi Ma, who was Neem Karoli Baba's successor, who died recently, who was my great teacher. And yeah, so many. I have my daughter who died, who I feel is now my ancestor. You know, she's on my altar of the sacred feminine. So lots of things, and a bowl of water and a bowl of earth and, you know, candles and all of the elements.
So just creating that sacred space really helps to bring up that energy, that divine feminine.
Yes. And it's so creative. And for those of you who are artists, which is probably almost every single one of you, it's really gratifying at the beauty. You know, you used the term beauty, Mercedes, when you were talking earlier about that beauty and the terror kind of being intermingled. And I think the divine feminine is so much about both of those things. Terror, not in the sense of trauma, but in the sense of radical amazement. And that is part of the mystical path as well. So altars, meditation, being in nature every day, physical practices that embody us, because the sacred feminine is so much about embodiment. And I'm shocked sometimes by how that gets left in the dust, you know, the tending of these sacred temples that we've been given. You know, we're too busy, we're too holy to worry about the illusion of the body. You know, now the sacred feminine is about reclaiming the holiness of incarnation, of the sacred breaking into every particle of being. And
that makes so much sense to me, because you're talking about this busyness where we get disembodied, and it's that the glorification or the making holy of busyness, the glorification of busyness, when that's not necessarily the whole truth. And coming from, my own domestications of striving for independence and being in this, patriarchal world where it was really about my masculine energy taking over and being the thing that protects me, and, creating this whole story around me because of our culture currently, that I felt I needed to be very much in my masculine. So reclaiming my feminine, or my divine feminine, has been something difficult, I think, mostly because of what I drew from what you're just saying there, because I'm attempting to intellectualize it instead of embody it, because that's the masculine in me the masculine in me is going, well, we know how to do this. We'll figure this out. We'll just do all the steps, It's very
right. Beautifully said. So well said. Yes.
And I know when I work with Kali, it's a very fierce energy. Like you said, it's very different than when I work with Tara or Mary Magdalene. And I know sometimes Mary Magdalene will ask me to work with Isis. And so they all bring something so different, and it's so, so beautiful. But I'm curious, a couple of things as questions come off of that. But one of the things that comes up for me a lot is how some people feel that these are idols and say, like, God is a jealous God. And instead of seeing that these are all like an aspect of God that gives us more access and a greater connection, they feel that and I'm sure that's a lot of religious programming and dogma, but I'm curious your thoughts around that.
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. I am, and I write about this in Wild Mercy, I am both a non-dualist and like gleefully unapologetic idolatress. And they're both true for me. So all of these different manifestations of the divine resonate with my heart in different ways. And here we are in the land of form. We don't live in that non-dual, undifferentiated cosmic realm where everything is all one. We live here in this plane of consciousness where there is duality and there is separation, and we can celebrate the beauty of that, and at the same time not believe that ultimately, Krishna, the name, my namesake's love, Mirabai is devoted to Krishna, right? Who is one of the favorite gods in Hinduism, is an actual thing. I mean, you can, and many Hindus do, but that rather it's sort of like the saints in the Catholic Church. Nobody thinks they're God, but they are these portals or doorways that invite us into a direct connection. So I don't see any conflict between offering incense and flowers to Hanuman, the Hindu monkey god who is the servant, the beloved servant of God, of Sita and Ram, and ultimately resting in the absolute oneness of the divine. They're not mutually exclusive for me. And I think that's a sort of feminine heart-mind balance that the masculine doesn't necessarily get.
Yeah. And the other question that came up was how the feminine has been removed from the Bible, specifically the real story of Mary Magdalene. She's my number one guide, and I feel I'm a Magdalene. Maybe you can articulate why the feminine, from your perspective, was removed from the Bible.
So
did that freeze up for you as well, Mirabai?
Okay. Yeah, that's why I was struggling too.
Yeah, will you redo that question? I think we lost most of it.
Yeah. So the other question that came up for me was how the feminine has been removed from the Bible, specifically Mary Magdalene, because I grew up in the church and it was pretty much a dark night of the soul to go through, to realize that I had been taught something different, than what was the truth. And I know we all have, but she being a number one guide for me, and me feeling myself as a Magdalene, this was a story that really hit me hard. So I wanted to just hear from you about how the feminine has been removed from the Bible and where you think we're headed when it comes to that, maybe.
Great. Just so you know, when I hear Bible, I think of I could just as a Jew, the New Testament isn't the only Bible, although I do love it very much. But it's happening in the Hebrew scriptures as well, the so-called Old Testament, where the women have been, they're there and they're wonderful, but they've been also largely erased and made secondary and made insignificant, like Miriam, the sister of Moses, who was such an important prophet in the biblical story and was just minimized. But back to Mary Magdalene, who I also love, there seems to be ample evidence that she was, when Jesus was alive, they were both teachers and they taught together. And she was equal to him in wisdom and access to the sacred. And that actually, by pairing up and teaching together, her drawing on her great, enormous gifts, which he acknowledged, especially in the Gospel of Mary, that was what a coinky dink thrown out of the canon. It's clear that she understood things about his teachings that nobody else did, and that he called upon her also to share her wisdom. So that's threatening to the patriarchy, super threatening to the established, masculine paradigm, the way of that hierarchical, male-dominated way of doing things. So she was super threatening because of her power and influence, and she also had her own resources financially. There were so many reasons that they tried to get rid of her. And so many of us now, including you, in asking this question and revealing how much she is your guide, so many of us now are reclaiming Mary Magdalene as a primary spiritual connector for us. And so what I was going to say is the relationship between them, whatever it was, whether it was sexual or not, there was this balance of the divine masculine and the divine feminine that gives rise to the rebirth of humanity, if we allow it to. That the Godhead is like sundered by the patriarchy, and only the masculine was lifted. And so by looking to the joining of Mary Magdalene and Jesus as a symbol of that rebalancing of the masculine and feminine, we can together as a collective, global human family give birth to this new humanity that is so urgently needed to navigate these perilous times that are going to continue to be dark and challenging, I'm afraid.
Yeah, that's beautiful. When it comes to, so her being that feminine wisdom that balanced and brought so much to the divine masculine, for us today, what does it mean to tap into our feminine wisdom specifically, not just for women, but for men as well?
Yeah, exactly. So the emphasis on the masculine way of doing and being, particularly in the religious sphere, but obviously in corporate world and across the human endeavor, in the landscape of human endeavors, but especially in religion, there has been so much harm done by silencing and burying the wisdom of the feminine that it's going to take an extra emphasis on feminine wisdom going forward, particularly in the spiritual communities. I mean, even in the alternative spiritual communities that I've been a part of for my whole life. I started on a spiritual path, I would say around 15, and I just turned 60. And I feel like all of them, including Hinduism, Buddhism, Sufism, all of these so-called alternative paths to mainstream Christianity or even Judaism, were still, all the teachers pretty much were men. All the scriptures were written by and for men, for kind of a, as I say in Wild Mercy, a boy-shaped reality. And so dogma, doctrine, rules, prescribed prayers, hierarchy, who are the teachers and who are the lower beings that are receiving the crumbs of their wisdom. All of that shit has to go. And we have to reclaim the wisdom of all beings. So when you say for women, men, and people of all genders, you're singing my song, so many men I know, particularly younger men, meaning say under 50, are desperately longing for that feminine wisdom as much as women, and certainly transgendered people, non-binary people are all saying, yes, we need to emphasize these feminine attributes of loving kindness, of fierce truth-telling, of misericordia, how do you say that? Mercy and compassion and forgiveness, but also speaking truth to power and emphasizing justice for all beings, particularly those on the margins. These are all these kind of wild and tender feminine attributes that people of all genders are reclaiming now.
Yeah. I wonder how we begin to identify, because you said, you have built these shrines in your home and all around you and found ways to call in this energy especially when it's needed, it's there to turn to. And you spent so much time figuring out how to hone this for yourself and how to deliver that to others. So I wonder, and this might be my masculine intellectual mind trying to put things in order, but what is a good way for us to start finding maybe a goddess to identify with, or a mystic to identify with, a female mystic to identify with?
It's wonderful. Well, I love reading. I mean, reading for me is not just intellectual, it's a spiritual experience, depending on what I'm reading. But so there are some beautiful books of goddesses across the spiritual traditions. Usually they're specific to a spiritual tradition, so Buddhism or Hinduism or Sufism is the mystical branch of Islam, and they don't have goddesses, but there are feminine wisdom beings. And Christianity has so many, especially the Catholic tradition has so many beautiful mystics. And then there are various goddesses, like in Judaism, the Shekhinah. We're not supposed to call her a goddess, but she is. She is the divine in feminine form. Sophia, wisdom in the Christian tradition. So just exploring through reading is a wonderful way, particularly sacred poetry. That is always a huge heart opener and awakener of consciousness for me. But the Shift Network has beautiful evergreen courses on the goddesses and the mystics. I'm not trying to sell books, because believe me, an author makes cents per book, but Wild Mercy gives a lot of feminine wisdom beings that you can resonate with and choose from.
Beautiful.
It's really good. Yeah, I know Wild Mercy. I don't know if we said the subtitle in the intro, but it's Living the Fierce and Tender Wisdom of the Woman Mystics. And then she goes through some of those in there. So it would be nice for our listeners to be able to pick that up and see what calls to them. And then I know for me, another book, Sophia Code, when I read that, it was like sometimes one will just stand out to you, and then, it's followed by an activation. So
yes, that's a great book.
Yeah, reading has been really key for me as well. To touch on what we were talking about right before that with the feminine wisdom, I've heard you talk about a feminine impulse to feel the pain of the world and to hold it. And that the feminine heart does not abandon any aspect of the human experience, including those feelings and impulses that can feel, maybe not so enlightening. Yeah. And that felt so resonant for me, but it also, I think because I've been so deep in that throughout my life, it can also feel not ungrounding, but just heavy, especially maybe like in the second chakra. So I don't know if for those that resonate with that, but also feel like it's not a burden, but just it is a lot of if you feel the pain, maybe some tips you have there or some tools for still accessing the playful side and the lighthearted side, because it can become almost like so serious,
Yeah. Yeah. It's a great question, Jade. Excuse me. So a couple of things. One is my sense is that when we allow ourselves to truly feel the pain of the suffering world, and we truly gather it into our arms, it's just that feminine impulse in people of all genders. When the pain that breaks our heart expands our capacity to hold the pain. It's the beautiful mystical paradox that the cure is in the wound, and so if we truly show up with curiosity and tenderness to experience what's going on in the world that's causing us such heartbreak, we will naturally expand enough to be able to endure it and be flooded with goodness, with sweetness, with beauty. All of those things are right under the suffering and the cloud of heaviness that we feel when we push it away. That's when the heaviness comes, is when we try to get away from it or try to fill it in with spiritual platitudes, or I'm just going to call on the goddess Lakshmi for prosperity and everything will be okay. And then it doesn't work. Those are called spiritual bypasses, right? For good reason. Those are the ways that we check out of reality. But paradoxically, when we fully allow ourselves to be present to what is, then we can hold it and even experience this sweetness and loving kindness right under it, and a boundless capacity to hold it and transmute it. And then another thing that I do is I just offer it to her. It's like, I can't hold it. I can't do anything about this. I mean, I can do my part, which is to keep my heart open in hell, as my friend and teacher Stephen Levine used to say. That I can do. I can cultivate that practice, but then I call on the Divine Mother and I offer it to her. That helps a lot. And to keep joy and celebration and creative arts and sensuality and all of those yummy human things woven into our days to refill the vessel.
Yeah. And I think you touched on this a little bit in that answer, really, but why is it that loss opens up this immense compassion in us?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I don't know why they designed it that way, but I will say that it probably has something to do with the way that grief and loss and trauma and sorrow are like an intense unguent that strips us of bullshit. Like, have you noticed when your heart is broken and suddenly you don't really care how you look in that new blouse? It just, or how much money's in your bank account or isn't, or how somebody looked at you the wrong way. Like, none of those things, those sort of superficial concerns motivate you anymore. It just grief, loss, trauma, tragedy just brings you squarely into what matters and what truly is important. And it kind of annihilates all of that garbage that distracts us. And that's when we can access those deeper well springs of the human heart, like loving kindness and compassion and self-forgiveness and humor. I have been, my ability to see the cosmic joke has been greatly increased through the terrible things that have happened to me.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. That idea of this big trauma or this loss is suddenly shaking you into perspective of all that stuff, that trivial stuff that you worry about on a day-to-day. Put it aside and see what's actually under there, for even if it's only for whatever time you spend grieving, and then you might return back and have to learn that again another time when you have or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't yet reached the part of the humor, but I'm hoping that's not far off. Before we move to our lightning round that we close off the show with, I wanted to just quickly ask you about the Great Mother and how we can develop relationship with her.
Well, through meditation, that's one way that I do that, is I just sit and close my eyes and take some deep breaths, and then I just call on her, and whatever she means. I don't even have to picture her in any particular form, although sometimes that just bubbles up. She'll look like this ancient indigenous mama, or grandmother. And sometimes she looks like one of the Hindu goddesses that I grew up loving. But mostly it's just this feeling of, often it's Mother Earth herself, that I just breathe into her, and I allow these kind of roots to extend from my base chakra into the earth, and just feel it intermingling with hers. And my root chakra, there's the word I was looking for. And then she becomes like this solid, grounded presence for me that I can instantly access. Once I've cultivated this intimacy with her, I can return to it very easily. But through meditation, through prayer, through walking in the woods and calling on her, the beach, the ocean, she's everywhere.
Yeah. Do you feel that, because so many of us have such a big mother wound, do you feel that this is one way to heal that?
Beautiful question. And I write about that in Wild Mercy because it keeps coming up when in my teaching. Yes. I mean, sometimes women will say, I don't want to picture the Divine Mother because I had such a bad mother, or I was such a bad mother. Sometimes that's the issue. I have no good role models. This is triggering for me. But I always encourage people to replace those negative experiences with this infinitely loving, warm, funny, affectionate, powerful, no bullshit Divine Mother. And it really, yes, I think it's a good question. And I think it really can heal the mother wound to establish this intimate bond with the Great Mother.
Yeah. I had wondered, because I often feel that dependent on what our father was like is sometimes how we can view God as, a heavenly father. Like you said, God can be source or, universe, whichever you would like to place it with. But yeah, I wondered if that was a projection there as well.
Yeah, it brings up for me, we're about to do a webinar on attachment styles, and it brings up that idea of the mother wound and why we end up communicating and attracting the people, communicating the way we do and attracting the people we do, and having these styles of attachment, and having a really you're always right next to, what do I want to say, you're all you have to do is just open yourself to the Great Mother, and she's there for you to reconnect with, instead of having to carry this wound for your whole life. You're able to heal it on your own by essentially reparenting yourself to some degree, but also asking for this parenting to come through this channel, the Great Mother. It gives so much hope, I think, to be able to really repair and set into place just a much more secure way of walking through life and communicating with others and being in relationship with others. So I find it just a great tool as well, like to be able to access that at any moment and know that it's all around you, like you said, at the beach, or wherever you really want to stop, slow down, and embody and breathe into this groundedness, because you're right here with her at all times.
And I think for our listeners, a way to convey it in a way that might feel attainable is, I love my mother. She did the best she could, but in my childhood, she was very volatile, very abusive. And I had a very big mother wound. These last couple of years, Mary Magdalene has felt very much like a mother. And there was a time in meditation where I saw, all these painful moments in my childhood and the state that my mother was in, my earthly mother. And then I started all the way back over. And this wasn't forced for me. This was just coming to me. But I started all the way back over, and I saw Mary Magdalene mothering me the way that I would have liked to have been mothered. What was really nice and healing in that experience wasn't just experiencing that with her, but also seeing that a lot of the things she was doing for me, the singing at night, the hugging, I didn't get hugged much as a kid, the hugging, the singing at night, the reading the stories, the sitting with me through the sexual trauma, all of these things were things I now embody as a mother. So it was the feeling of, oh, I didn't realize how good this feels, what I'm passing on. Since I hadn't experienced it, I didn't realize how good it feels, all of that touch, all of that song, until I felt it with her. And then it felt like, okay, so it was really beautiful. So if that, hopefully that maybe can, make it a little more tangible for the ones hearing it.
Yeah. Thank you. That's beautiful.
All right, Mirabai. So we ask a few questions to everyone who comes on the show. So let's shoot these at you and see what you got for us. So So first one is, if you could hug your younger self right now, what would you say?
When people tell you you're beautiful in your own way, that doesn't mean what you think it means. Your beauty is real, and it's going to grow, and you can relax about how you appear.
That's beautiful.
I needed to hear that for sure. What age were you when you were telling yourself that?
10.
Yeah.
If you could have the whole world read one book, which would it be?
Oh my gosh. I should have done my homework and known you were going to ask me this.
No, it's the hardest question on the show.
Is it? I'm like looking at my bookshelf right now. I just love reading so much. It would be really hard to.
Or maybe what was one that really, encouraged you on your journey?
And I'm trying to not pick one by a man, because
That's okay.
all right.
Well, I loved it. A lot of times you say like a feminine mystic in a male body.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Those are the ones I'm thinking of. I would say Saint Teresa of Avila's interior castle.
Saint Teresa of Avila's interior castle. Great.
Yeah, that sounds cool. Just the name sounds cool. All right. If you could whisper one phrase to everyone on the planet, what would it be?
Oh my gosh. I really should have looked this up before I listened to this. Keep your heart open.
It's really good.
Yeah, that's the hardest thing.
I know. I tell myself almost every day, stay open. It's work, but it gets easier. How can people find you online and find your work? I know you have the Divine Feminine course as well.
Oh gosh, so many things. Just Google my name, Mirabai Starr, and you will find lots of things, including my website. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect.
And I YouTube stuff, a lot of YouTube. I don't pay attention to any of that. It's just like I offer it and then it's gone. It's gone.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for your time today. This was such a blessing.
Thank you for your insightful questions, both of you, and for the beautiful work you're doing in this world.
Thank you.
Yeah, we really appreciate the work you're doing, and I'm just excited to be able to share this with our listeners as well.
All right. I think that was our most mystical episode.
Absolutely.
I know we've said that word a lot, but
yeah,
I feel like our last, months worth of episodes have been really focused on men. So I enjoyed, writing this outline focused towards the feminine.
And just being in the energy of it, it's definitely a slowdown. It feels like such
more expansive too.
Yeah, to some degree. I mean, I think both are so needed for expanding, but this was very much for me.
Well, not that the male is contracting, but it felt very like wide.
Yeah. This is where I don't know, the way I visualize it is when we're dealing with masculine energy. We're really we've been working so much with the masculine psyche lately, that it's about creating the structures and making the plan and doing the direction piece and the purpose piece. And then when you get into the feminine flow and it's real creative, like this episode where it's just mystery and openness, it's like we get this big, it looks like a mushroom cloud from almost an explosion is the way I envision it. And then the masculine goes, okay, I see all that stuff. It's just going to continue spreading out into the universe forever and ever and never slowing down. So it captures it and brings it into form that we can actually access and use in walking life.
Yeah. And that I know both of our magic tricks are pulled from her. I believe yours is too. I just opened up her book. This is on page 92 for those of you that want to order her book. At the end of every chapter, she has some sort of practice like this, whether it's deepening or opening or expanding, whatever it is that chapter's focused on. She has a little writing prompt at the end, and they're all really, really good. So this one on page 92 is called Deepening. It says, mystical Jewish wisdom teaches us that we are all born with a particular task we are meant to do to contribute to the healing of the world, and we are precisely and perfectly designed to do it. What is the unique task imprinted on your soul? Hint, it is probably something you are already good at and is almost definitely something you love doing. Sit quietly with your eyes closed or downward cast and unfocused. Allow yourself to contemplate your strengths and imagine how you might harness them for the benefit of others. Write down a list of ways you could rise to the call, even if they don't look like dramatic contributions or if they take a very different form than you might have imagined. Be wildly creative. Make a plan of action to implement one of those ideas. That's my magic trick from her.
I like it.
Yeah.
All right. Mine also.
It reminds me also of Rebecca Campbell's work.
Who?
Rebecca Campbell.
Oh, Rebecca Campbell.
Yeah. This book, if you liked Rebecca Campbell, you'll love this book.
Yeah, Rebecca Campbell's got some good stuff in there too.
Mhm.
Finding your light and opening up your creativity for sure. So this also comes from Wild Mercy, and this is also a deepening practice. So the instruction is to write a letter to a child as if you knew you were going to die soon, and you're passing along what you most wish for them to know. So it's kind of like your last, what you'd say in your dying breath to a child, to give them as much nuggets as you can. So what is your deepest wisdom, your highest truth at this point in your life, right? If you're on your deathbed today, and what are the things that delight you, in which you'd like for the child to also take delight in? What are the secrets you're ready to reveal, or heroes who have inspired you? And it's all about distilling the essence of your legacy in that last letter, essentially. So I think it's just a really beautiful practice. And I don't think it takes too long either to just close your eyes again and before you write, and just think about what comes to you that you'd want to leave. If this is for whatever reason, your back's against the wall, and this is your last 5 minutes, and you get to say what you want to say to a person, especially a child who still has so much life in front of them, so that they can live their life to the fullest. So that's her practice.
So good. Yeah, I love that one. That sounds very much like something we would suggest people to do.
Yeah, we've had some other versions of it in the past.
Yeah. All right, Magic Mobbers, thank you so much for tuning in and taking this journey with us. If this episode held some magic for you, please share it with your friends and family. This would mean so much to us. And don't forget to join us on our Instagram page at The Magic Hour and let us know what your favorite episodes have been so far. We appreciate all of your feedback and want to know what's lighting you up.
Yes, guys. And you know that the only way we get any reach with this podcast, with Apple Podcasts, is by getting that 5-star rating and review from you guys. So please send those over. We really do delight in reading those and seeing those stars come through. And I just want to send a big thank you, so much gratitude to those of you who are joining us here and listening to us and corresponding with us on Free Social. And of course, the men who have joined us in our workshop, Awakening the King Within. You guys are really showing up there. So just so glad to be building this community of amazing light beings that are here shining brightly. So appreciate you. Go listen to some of our past episodes in our podcast library now. We'll meet you there. Until then,
Be a light.